Assalamu alaikum everyone, hope you all are doing great. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Sarvin Faisal. I'm a quality control analyst here in Apprise System and I'm leading the department as well. So today I'm conducting this webinar as a host. This webinar is all about Active Directory. Here we will discuss about Active Directory. It is very important and beneficial for everyone, especially for those who are from the field of IT professionals, security analysts, and system administration. Well, this is my first webinar, but from Apprise System, it's their 7th webinar, and all of the previous webinars are already uploaded on our YouTube channel, so you can watch them as well. You can give us a response, and also you can comment there that which topic you're looking for, we should add up into our next webinar. So, so can you start, William?
Okay.
Yes. You can share your PPT.
All right, one moment. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's visible.
All right, great. Okay. All right, so I guess I can begin now, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the topic for today is introduction to Active Directory, and I believe for us to go into Active Directory exploitation, we kind of have some kind of experience with Active Directory previously. So this will just be like an introductory session, nothing too crazy, just introducing us to the Active Directory concept. So a brief introduction. My name is Hameed, and then I'm a red teamer. These are my certifications. You can look me up online. And so today we'll be looking at, of course, introducing us to Active Directory. We'll be looking at some authentication protocols. We would as well be looking at the main reason why we're here, which is pen testing Active Directory. And then we'll be looking at some common tactics, techniques, and procedures. And then a practical demonstration that will be covering the entire Active Directory queue chain. So what to expect from this session? Like I said earlier, we wouldn't be doing anything too crazy, just introducing us to the concept and then letting us know how to, putting us in the right mindset. If we want to attack an Active Directory environment, how can we think? How can we, enumerate, find vulnerabilities, what to look for and things like that. So that's what we'll be getting from this session. So down to it, we really cannot talk about Microsoft Active Directory without talking about directory service, because directory service basically gave birth to Microsoft Active Directory. And directory service has been around for a very long time, way before Microsoft Active Directory came to be. And the textbook definition here states that directory services are database for storing and maintaining information about users and resources. So in a network, when you have computers scattered all over the place, computers, database servers, and different things everywhere, they are not organized and there might be problem with management and things like that. So directory services helps you to organize these things, put them in structures where you know where to find what you're looking for. If you are going to look for the computers in the finance department, you know where to find them. If you're looking for the computers in the audit department, you know where to find them. So directory services helps you to organize things like this. And then Microsoft Active Directory is not the only one. Like I said, there are multiple ones. There's like GX Explorer, there's Apple Open Directory from Apple Computers. There are multiple different kinds of directory services that are available. So down to Microsoft Active Directory itself, it's a database for storing and managing information about users and objects in an Active Directory environment. So that's Microsoft Active Directory. And I wouldn't want us to put a lot of focus on forest, and because it's kind of high level. So, but we need to understand that the forest exists, and then there are trees, there are domains. Domains are in the tree. Multiple domains are in the tree, and in the tree is in the forest. And in the domain, we have organizational units. You can see the structure. I don't know if you can see my mouse. Can you see my mouse? If you can see my mouse, let me know.
Yes, I can.
Okay, yes. So this is the forest, and in the forest, we have the tree, and in the tree, we have the domain, and in the domains, we have the organizational units. So these are all objects in the Active Directory. And part of these objects, they are users, they are groups, they are computers, they are printers, they are contacts, they are whole objects within the Active Directory. So they are standalone objects, and it kind of speak to each other. We are going to go further to explain how how this works in subsequent slides. So yeah, like the way we have HTTP as the protocol for the web that helps you to move data from clients to server and things like that. The access protocol for Active Directory is LDAP, which is Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. It helps you to enumerate LDAP, like definition here states. It helps you to manage, organize query information in an hierarchical directory structure. So if you're going to find like a particular user, or you're going to find a particular group, in a group, the only way for you to query this data is by using LDAP. Like this string that you can see here, what this string does is searching for a user, this user in this particular group, in this particular organizational unit, in this particular domain. So that's the way LDAP works. And aside from just being a resource locator, you can also use LDAP for several things like single sign-on. Yes, you can use it for single sign-on. In a situation where maybe you go to a company for a pen test, right? And then you find that the staffs are logging into the application, to an application or to a website or whatever internally with their corporate credentials, right? They are using the Active Directory credentials to sign in. There's a good chance that the application is running LDAP queries, connecting to an LDAP server to see if that user exists on that server. So it's nice to test for things like LDAP injection. I don't know if you guys know about that, but there's an injection vulnerability called LDAP injection where you can put LDAP queries into this login and password, and then it can open you to like plethora of findings when you try that. So that's one of the things to note, LDAP injection. Yes, so we're going to look at authentication protocols because it's very, very important. If you'll be exploiting Active Directory, it's very key for you to understand how authentication works, because for instance, you're doing a pen test and then you find NTLM hash. If you really don't know what NTLM hash is, or you know the difference between NTLM and net NTLM, you might spend a lot of time trying to, do something and then you're doing the wrong thing. For instance, you can pass an NTLM hash, right? But you cannot pass like a net NTLM v2 hash because you can't pass it. You can only relay it. It's a network authentication hash. So knowing how authentication protocols work will really help you with exploiting Active Directory. So first, we're going to look at NTLM, which is, I wouldn't say it's defunct, but there's a newer version, which is NTLM v2, which is much more recent and security-wise is far more better than NTLM. But for legacy purposes, Microsoft still retains NTLM authentication and still in use currently. So on the high level, like the way NTLM works, if you could pay attention, kind of number this so you can understand. Well, first things first, you as a user, when you authenticate to the client, right? The client sends a user request access to the server that you're trying to access. Then this server sends a challenge message. Furthermore, this client responds back to the server with the response to the client. If this response is valid, the server checks with the KDC. The KDC is the key distribution center. In most cases, is usually the domain controller in the network. So once it confirms this, you're able to authenticate to the server, right? It's just a very high level. There's a lot of problems with this stuff. There's a lot of problem with this authentication method, and there are lots of vulnerabilities. You're able to pass this hash and do all sorts of things. Microsoft recognized this, so they had to upgrade it to NTLM v2, which is far more secure than this. But like I said, this is still in use. And then more recently, this Kerberos, not really recent, but Kerberos is still very recent, still very new, and it's far more secure compared to NTLM because there's a lot of key exchange going on back and forth. There's a lot of back and forth here and there trying to secure the authentication mechanism. So it's far more secure than NTLM. So looking at this, you can see 4 lines, but there's a lot going on more than these 4 lines. But just to break it down, like in a simple way, the first thing that happens when you're trying to authenticate with Kerberos is when, for instance, this is your client, like your desktop PC, you're trying to access this server, whether it's a database server or web application server, you're trying to access the server. The first thing that happens is your client sends a TGT, request for a TGT, and a TGT is a ticket granting ticket, right? It's this TGT back to the client. Now, the client takes this TGT, sends it back to the KDC, requesting for a TGS. A TGS is a ticket granting service ticket. I know it's a lot of word, but the TGS is a ticket granting service ticket. You can note that down and kind of maybe read up on it later. So once you get this TGS is then sent to request for whatever information that this client wants to request for, sends to the server, presents this TGS to the server and say, oh, I need some data in the database. The server confirms this TGS and then releases the data back to the client. So a lot is going on. But I want you to pay attention to this first line, requesting TGS and getting a TGT back, because we are still going to focus on this later on. Now, when it comes to pen testing Active Directory, which I'm sure this is why most of you are here, we're going to look at several things. And one of those things is the queue chain. So if you're on an engagement, right, you're supposed to do like a pen test for a bank or maybe a whole company or a small company, everything that you're going to have to do is going to be in the context of this queue chain. And the first thing is initial access. So gaining initial access depends on, you can try multiple things, right? But one of the first things is client-side vulnerabilities. You have to do your OSINT, you have to look for assets that belong to that organization. And you have to look for domains, look for subdomains, look for web applications that belong to these clients, look for vulnerabilities. I mean, first things first, you find a website that belongs to, let's say, a bank, right? One of the things you want to do is, okay, what applications are running on this website? What kind of web application you start to test for? Maybe template ejection, maybe it's PHP, you want to look for like LFI or RFI, that is a local file inclusion or remote file inclusion, things like that. Look for vulnerabilities that can get you on the network in one way or the other. Aside from client-side vulnerabilities, we want to look at client-side execution, either by sending malicious documents to staffs, sending malicious documents, sending malwares, sending whatever gets you on the network. That's what initial access is about. Or insider collaboration, which is maybe you have somebody on the inside that could give you access to the network without you having to do anything. They just you give them a payload, they run it, and you're on the network. So the second thing in the queue chain is local privilege escalation, which is not really mandatory if you have enough things to move laterally. But in most cases, I think it's sensible to get local administrative access on the machine that you find yourself at. And there are multiple ways to doing this, either by looking for kernel level
Okay, I think Hameed is disconnected. We have to wait for 2 minutes at least to him coming back. Hameed, you are muted.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
All right. And you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I got disconnected. I really don't know why. So yeah, like as I was saying, the two most important things is post-exploitation enumeration and lateral movement. Because if you really don't know how to enumerate the machine that you are on, you don't have enough information to move laterally, right? So these two things are very key. And if these two things are, if you're able to get around these two things, you'll find yourself being domain admin in no time, because you're able to move from one computer to another segment, to another, left and right. And then eventually you gain domain dominance, which is depending on the objective of the engagement. In most engagements, if you're able to get the domain, that's the end of the engagement. So I'm really going to go down into post-exploitation enumeration and lateral movements, because like I said, they are very important. And this, who am I, where am I, and what do I have? My own personal methodology for enumerating Active Directory. So if you kind of understand, I believe it's going to help you in one way or the other when it comes to exploiting AD. Yeah, so this is a mind map, and I know this is a lot, so I'm not expecting you to kind of, let me zoom down so you can see. I'm not expecting you to know all this, but it's a good thing to have on the expert level at some point. This is almost everything that could happen in an Active Directory environment: constrained delegation, unconstrained delegation, resource-based constrained delegation, DC sync, all these things. So I'm going to share this document with you. It's just a good thing to have, but this is a lot. You cannot have this on your head. Maybe over time, with like years of experience, you might be able to, hash all these commands and things like this. But generally, I don't think you should bother yourself with this. All you need to know are these three things that I feel are going to help you. Who am I, where am I, and what do I have? So when it comes to exploiting it, you want to ask yourself is, who am I? This has been on the network already. Like, who am I? Am I a domain admin? Like, you need to really know what privileges that the user that you currently have is having. What privileges do you have as that user? And for instance, okay, when you do who am I and you figure out that you are a domain admin, if you're a domain admin, yes, as a domain admin, you have all the privileges in the domain. You can just carry out some reflection attacks like maybe DC sync or DC shadow immediately, and then you have all the hash. DC sync is a kind of attack that tells the domain controller like, oh, I'm a domain controller, just like you, give me all the hash that you have and I can store them for you. And then the domain controller feels like, oh, this is my this is another domain on the network. Let me give my hash to it. And then that way you're able to get all the hash of all the users in the entire domain. So it's a very serious thing. So if you're not a domain admin, then what user are you? If you figure out what user you are, you look at what privileges you have as that user and what can you do with it. And then from there, you can then decide on what to do next. The second thing is, where am I, right? And this is very important because, for instance, the things that you can do on a client PC is different from what you can do on a database server, is different from what you can do on a web server. So knowing where you are also is very important. And a good example is, if, let's say, you find yourself on a web server, right? If you do realize that, oh, I'm on a web server, then you start to think like, this is a web server. Most likely it's connecting to some kind of database. And for the web application to communicate with the database, there needs to be some kind of authentication going on between them, either through Kerberos authentication, either through usernames and passwords, which is the most, which happens most of the time. So definitely there needs to be some kind of password somewhere authenticating the web application to the database. So in that case, you start to look for things like maybe connection strings, look for password in configuration files and things like that. And I think 6, 7 out of 10 times you'll find password in connection strings. I've done so many engagements, and then that's the way I got domain admin, by finding password in connection strings. So where am I is one very good question, right? If you are a local admin on a system, you can dump hashes, you can export Kerberos tickets. If you're on like a client machine, you can find maybe GitHub files, you can import those GitHub files and then continue your lateral movement that way. And then what do I have, which is the third thing, in the methodology that I would like to share with you guys. Constantly, at every moment, note taking is very, very good. You need to keep noting down, what do I have? What do I have? Very, very important. Every single thing that you find is not going to waste, whether it's password, whether it's anything that you find in an Active Directory assessment is very, very important. So you need to keep noting them down. When you have passwords, you have to spray them, see where the password works, look for open shares, look for internal business applications. I mean, you find yourself on the network, one of the first things you need to do is scan the entire internal network, specifically looking for port 80. Look for internal web applications that you can authenticate to. The passwords that you have found, try them on each and every business application. See if you're able to authenticate to those business applications. Look for open shares, spray them around, and then that way you're able to find ways to, move around. And I mean, the major tools in this sphere, PowerView, Bloodhound, helps you to, we might look at the demo on Bloodhound if time permits us, but Bloodhound and the SharePoint Ingester helps you to visualize the Active Directory environment in like a graphical user interface where you can see the connections and the interactions between all the objects in the Active Directory network. So yeah, common tactics, techniques, and procedures. This is from the research I did and from my own experience. This is like the statistics that I'll put into how lateral movement and post-exploitation enumeration happens most times. 10% of the time, you find password in sysvol. Sysvol is system volume. Most servers have this folder open by default. So if you're on the AD, one of the first things that you want to do is check for sysvols, because they store group policies in them. And these group policies usually contain passwords and connection strings and different things, right? So that's one of the things that you need to check for. Second thing is missing patches, right? Zero logon, all these CVEs, you need to try them, see if they work in the Active Directory environment. And then Kerberos and Asrep roasting. These are Kerberos attack, and we're going to be looking at one of them as a demonstration. Kerberos and Asrep roasting now. So I'm going to talk about this moving on. And then 75%, you can see this number is SMB shares, because system administrators tend to often open shares on the network. For instance, IT support, most times they have to go to different floors, different sections to fix issues. And they continually need to access files and softwares that they use. So just to avoid going around with pen drives or maybe going from one floor to another floor to copy files, they just set up an open share on their own system. And then, so from whatever computer they want to authenticate, they connect to that share and download what they have to download. So a lot of the times they keep doing this. And then as an attacker, when you find yourself on the network and you search for shares, you find these shares open. Finding these shares open, you find all sorts of softwares. I've been on an engagement where I found an open share and there was a file there. It was an internal file. It was an exe, which really nothing to it, but reversing the application, like I reversed the application to read the source code. I was able to find some API keys that I used to authenticate to an internal business application. From there, I moved around. So SMB shares is, in fact, is very, very high. 75% of the time, you're able to get domain admin just by getting access to some open shares on the network. Yeah, so Asrep roasting is, for you to fully understand it, you need to take your time to understand how Kerberos authentication works. That's when a lot of this is going to make sense to you. But on the surface level, there's a feature in server administration, right? In an Active Directory environment, this feature do not require Kerberos authentication. Once you do this, once you click on this, and then you're asking Kerberos authentication not to work on this particular user, you're opening that user up for kind of vulnerability called Asrep roast. Because if you remember, when I was talking about Kerberos authentication, one of the first things that I said happens is the server or the machine sends a request to the KDC, which is asking for a TGT, right? Which is KRBES request. And then it sends a response back to it. That response usually contains the password hash of this particular user. But when you disable this, when you say do not require Kerberos authentication, no check goes on at the first phase. Once you just request for a TGT from the KDC gives you that TGT immediately without even confirming if you are who you say you are. And that is because you've disabled this stuff. So I can get on the network and then search for users that don't have Kerberos authentication enabled. Once I find those users, I can just impersonate them and send a request to the KDC and say, oh, give me the TGT. Once I get this TGT, it contains the password hash. All I have to do is crack this hash and get the password of that particular user. And I think it's going to make a lot of sense when I get to the demonstration part. And I'm going to show you guys how all this works together. But yeah, so I'm going to unshare my screen now and share the other screen so you can see the demonstration. One more moment. All right. Said, can you see my terminal screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So I was creating a lab for this purpose, but I think time will not really permit me to. So I'm going to be using a machine from a vulnerable environment. And let's just scan this machine. think it's 10.150.150.66. And initial TCP. So I would assume that some of us are pen testers here, and we really don't need to. We really know what's going on here. So what I'm just doing basically is I'm scanning this machine. Here I'm searching for just show me open ports. I'm searching recursively. I'm searching in a way that it shouldn't show me port 90 first, then show me port 1000, then port 2. So it just arranged the ports in order in a way that I could immediately visualize them. And I like to store my scans in like in a orderly manner. Like I save my initial scans to a TCP file, then I do initial.udp scan, I do full.tcp, which is a full scan, I do full.udp. So I don't leave any stones untouched. I scan both TCP and UDP ports, everything. So looking at this, I can see this DNS on 53, right? I can see Kerberos on port 88. I can see 139, 135, 445. So this is part of enumeration. Me looking at this already, I know the next phase of attack, because I know I can see 139 and 445, which are SMB ports. And in this sense, me knowing that, okay, there's 139 and there's 445 here, I know what kind of attacks that I want to go with. I know I can do PS exec, I know I can do SMB exec because the SMB ports are open. And I can see 3389, yeah, which is Windows Management Interface, WMI. So I can do things like Evil WinRAM, and just knowing these things would really, really help your exploitation tactics. And now, attacking this machine, I wouldn't bother myself with any other ports here. But particularly, I need to pay attention to LDAP because, like I said earlier, LDAP is a resource locator. And for LDAP to be open on this machine, it means I can query this machine for like LDAP syntax. I could send LDAP queries to ask for information. I can ask for users in the network. I can ask for groups. I can ask for organizational units. I can ask for basically anything. And it's going to give me a response because the port is open. So in this case, there are tools or software that you could use to query for LDAP information. There's LDAP search. There's some, I think LDAP enum. There's several scripts, but for me, I just prefer to use Mmap because if you're not aware, the Mmap scripting engine is very, very robust. And, you can really query a lot of information. Let's do, yeah, scripts. So we're going to run the LDAP script on this machine, and we're not going to boot. So we're going to store this to ldap.txt. Yeah, maybe we should just do 389. And that's 150.150.66. Yeah, so I hope that's right. Okay, so yeah, let me show you where the scripts for LDAP are. USR, Nmap scripts. Yeah, so these are the scripts. I mean, if you're enumerating for like HTTP vulnerabilities, you can just run all these HTTP scripts towards the web server. If you're looking for SNMP, there are so many things. And for LDAP, there are so many scripts on LDAP somewhere around the year. So using the asterisk means run all this, but do not brute force for usernames or anything. Now, querying the LDAP, you could see there's a lot of information. If I could zoom in here, you can see a lot of information. These are Nmap scripting engine already automated the process for me by requesting different kind of information from the LDAP server. And immediately we can see the DC, we can see the DC's Doom ops, we can see usernames, you can see usernames like guests, we can see their password, logon time, basically all the Active Directory information about that user is here. We can see another user here, Revenant, and so on and so forth. There are so many users here. And us having this username is a way for us to like further carry out more attacks by getting usernames and emails We can see all this information. We can sort this out. I think I saved it to a file. Let me see. Yeah, okay, I saved it to a file. So let's just grab the emails. Let me show you an example. Given name. Where's the email? Okay, yeah. So the user principal name is one thing that we need. Let's grab this. User principal name. Okay, we can cut that. Okay. What I'm doing is saving the emails to a file, and then I can still cut this to save the usernames. One, okay. Save this as names.txt. So when we cut emails and names, so now we have the names and emails of all the users on the network. And like I said, one of the things to test for is hash request. And I want to ask the LDAP server for, can you provide me with all the users on this network that have Kerberos pre-authentication disabled? This way, if I find any user amongst all these guys that have Kerberos pre-authentication disabled, I could then request for their TGT immediately. I could impersonate them and request for their TGT. And in this case, once I get that TGT, I can then crack the TGT to get the password of any of these guys. So there are different tools for us to do this. For me, I like using InPackets. And you could use CrackMap exec, you could use, there are other tools you could use, but for me, I like using InPackets. And then we already figure out what the domain is. For InPackets to work, is always, from a Linux machine, it's always nice to add the domain to your host file. I think I'll just do that right now. So local. I hope we're not running out of time. Said, let me know if we're running out of time. I would try to round up very soon.
Yes, we are running out of time. So if anyone have any questions, you can type in the chat. So
yeah. So let me just copy this command.
Yes.
Okay. So one thing we are going to do now is yes. So this is InPackets. This InPackets tool helps us to enumerate the domain and look for users. Like I said, they have Kerberos pre-authentication disabled, and then it's going to output the users, going to output their hash, the TGT, so I could crack them. Where did I say this? Okay, names. Right. So this is really not going to take a time. Yeah. So we can see that this user CyberDemon has pre-authentication disabled. And if we check here, I'm sure we should be able to find the hash. This is the hash of that user. We're immediately able to get the hash of this user. So all we need to do now is to crack this hash with maybe John the Ripper or maybe Hashcat or whichever one. So I'll just quickly crack this hash. I think M18500 is 0. Yes, issues. 18500, 18200. Yeah. So this shouldn't take time. And if we're able to crack this hash, we're able to get the password of the user. And getting the password of the user here. So you can see the password of the user here is Doomhammer211. So having this password of a user that is on the network. Sai, did you say something?
No. Carry on.
Okay. So having this password now, this comes to the technique of what I have. Now I have a password. For my previous enumeration, I know that there's their ports open, their SMB ports. I could do PSSX, I could do Evil WinRIM, I could do all these things. So having this password immediately, I can maybe try Evil WinRIM. Let me see if I could type here and copy. Okay. So I'm trying to authenticate with the password and the username that I have to this server, to the Windows management port. This is a WinRIM port. And you can see I have a shell on this machine as that particular user. One moment. Even WinRIM can be very, very buggy and slow sometimes. But basically, this is it. I'm able to authenticate to this machine as the user. I can cancel this and run it again. Press Y to exit. Yep. So who am I? You can see I'm the user revenant on this particular machine. So immediately now, being on the machine, we've done our initial access, we've got into the machine. The next thing for you to do is to, try your best to get a privilege escalation, try to get local admin. You can run WinPs, you can run, you can run WinPs, you can run Power Up, you can run all these tools. After that, you can do some Power View enumeration, you can ingest some blow down data, visualize it. I feel we are going to have another stream if Said is going to permit me, so we can go in depth. We're going to finish this machine. We're going to complete this machine. We're going to get local admin on it, and then we're going to move laterally to another machine. We're going to look at some kind of advanced concepts like I said earlier, constraint delegation, resource-based constraint delegation. We'll look at some kind of high-level attacks, basically how to move around using scheduled attacks, ATSEC, SMBSEC, and all these things. We'll look at local administrator password and all those high-level stuff. But basically, this is just the kill chain. And the most important takeaway for me to you guys is to know those three things. Who am I? Where am I?
Let's
And
wind this up. I think we get some questions in the chat. Let's wind it up.
Okay.
We have 2 minutes left.
Okay.
We got some questions in the chat.
So let me see what questions you have. Can you read them out for me?
Yes, sure.
I can't find them. Yeah.
Okay, so the first question is, can we utilize Bloodhound for ad pen test?
For what?
Can we utilize Bloodhound for ad pen test?
For AD pen test?
Yes, AD pen test.
Yes, of course. So you need to set up Bloodhound, then you use the ingester to ingest information. So in a very serious environment, right? In a very serious environment, you have EDRs and you have security apparatus that are stopping you from gathering data with Bloodhound. So you have to learn to stay in memory. You can use the sharphound binary, but then it will get caught by antivirus. So you have to stay in memory. You have to bypass AMSI. There's so many things going on there. But yes, you could always use Bloodhound to gather data that helps you to visualize it instead of using Power View. But I try to avoid using Bloodhound most times because it's very noisy. Once you run Bloodhound on a machine, if there's a SOC monitoring, they know something is going on immediately.